1. Cut to the chase. New game means new game. Not long story cutscenes, not minigames where you hold down a button, not free roam segments where you spend minutes going back and forth to find the code to open a door, grab a key, and then open another door to finally play Night 1. We all have stories to tell in our games, but when I click new game, I want to play and not just sit back and watch. You're better off resorting to a short and sweet cutscene that gives the player a bit of context before playing Night 1. I love stories in games, but tell me your story while I'm playing Night 1. Tell me your story after I played Night 1. The sooner you get to the meat of the game, the better. And if you're adding these free roam segments before Night 1, make them short and a little more interesting than clicking on papers to find the code. You could also be like FNaF the flip side and just let the player head straight to the office if desired. 2. Easy doesn't mean boring, but still keep it easy. Your first night is an introduction to the mechanics and enemies your game has to offer, so don't waste it by leaving the player with nothing to do, or making the animatronics so slow that by the time they reach the office, it's 6 AM. To check whether the player has actually learned the mechanics, you should guarantee at least 1 or 2 encounters with the active animatronics, so that they can't win until they've learned. Aim for more than just 1 encounter though, to not only have a bit more action in the night, but also make the player more consistent before moving on to a harder night. Make sure there is enough variety in the encounters too. Having something to do throughout the night is nice, but I don't want the exact same encounter over and over and over again. Break that cycle however you can. 3. Careful with your instructions. Don't just rely on instructions like phone calls or letters where you only read or listen. There should be scenarios and encounters to encourage the player to make use of the mechanics you're teaching them. Not only is taking these lessons to practice a lot more fun, but you also reinforce that knowledge. The instructions shouldn't delay the gameplay, like how the night doesn't begin in some fan games until the phone call is finished. It ain't fun to have nothing to do for minutes before the beginning of a night that's going to have little happening in it already, so don't freeze the player's progress while instructing them. And don't overwhelm the player with too many instructions. If each animatronic or mechanic requires quite a bit of explanation, then don't start with too many of them. Finally, respect the player's intelligence. Not everyone is a full beginner, so allow them to skip tutorials and make hand-holding elements optional. And 4. Your game isn't FNaF 1. We're entirely used to the standard mechanics and behaviors in FNaF Fangames, watching security cameras and monitoring evil animatronics walking towards our office. The first night in FNaF 1 is scary and iconic because there was nothing like it before, weaponizing the player's uncertainty. And it's not such a bad idea to replicate that in a way or another. Night 1 is the best time to set a decent and tense horror atmosphere for your game, and to do that you need to pair the action with some elements of surprise and mystery. Anything that makes the player lose their confidence and perceive the night as harder than it actually is will make Night 1 much more than a boring side dish to skip, and possibly one of the highlights of your game too. Unpredictable events and behaviors, unique mechanics, and decent scripted sequences are a few common methods. But what works for each fan game is vastly different, so be a little precise with what you implement. Don't overlook the first night of your fan game. You can't get away with the excuse that it'll get fun at night 2 or 3. A game has to be fun the whole time and not after a certain point. It's also the best time for the player to get their feet wet and get a hang of the basics, so take advantage of it. Otherwise, just make new games send you straight to night 2.